Blood stained the cheap linoleum as my daughter hissed her final agonizing words. I wish anyone else was my mother. I hate you. When my eyes snapped open, we were souls suspended in the void before birth. She violently clawed toward a billionaire's womb. Smiling through my tears, I let her go. Pain was the only inheritance I ever gave my daughter in our first life. We lived in a suffocating, mold-infested apartment in South Boston, a place where hope went to rot alongside the unpaid utility bills. Her father, David, was a man whose soul had been consumed by the racetrack and the bottom of a gin bottle. I worked 3 jobs sewing alterations until my fingers bled, scrubbing the floors of corporate high-rises at midnight, and frying eggs at a diner by dawn, just to keep the loan sharks from breaking our door down. I did it all for Emily. I took David's drunken backhand so she wouldn't have to. I wore shoes with holes in the soles so she could have pristine white sneakers for her first day of high school. But poverty is a poison that doesn't just kill your body, it rots your relationships. Emily didn't see my sacrifices. She only saw the things she didn't have. She looked at me with a disdain so pure it burned, disgusted by my calloused hands, my cheap clothes, and the perpetual exhaustion etched into my face. The breaking point happened on a freezing Tuesday night in November. Emily had stolen the envelope of cash I had hidden beneath the floorboards, money meant to keep the heat on to buy a designer dress for a party hosted by the ultra-wealthy Pendleton family. When I confronted her, the argument escalated into a screaming match that shattered the remaining fragments of our family. She ran out into the icy rain, blinded by rage and entitlement, and stepped directly into the path of a speeding, drunk-driven truck. I held her crushed body in the middle of that wet street, screaming until my vocal cords tore. But her final words weren't of love or regret. They were a curse. I wish anyone else was my mother. I hate you. Then, the world went white. I didn't wake up in a hospital, nor did I find myself in heaven or hell. I found myself suspended in a glowing, amniotic ocean of spiritual energy. It was the void of rebirth, a miraculous, impossible juncture where souls hover just before attaching to their physical vessels. I looked down and saw that my spirit was tethered to a fragile 4-month-old fetus. And floating right beside me, connected by a shimmering silver cord of maternal destiny, was Emily. She remembered. I could feel her memories radiating off her spiritual form, the bitterness, the accident, the hatred. In this ethereal plane, time and space folded over each other. Beside us, floating in her own golden opulent light, was the womb of Evelyn Pendleton, the billionaire matriarch whose daughter's party Emily had been trying to attend. Evelyn was 4 months pregnant, just like I was. Emily's soul saw the Pendleton womb. She saw the flash of future wealth, the sprawling mansions, the private jets, the glittering tiaras, and the effortless luxury she had literally died trying to taste. Without a second thought, Emily's spirit began to writhe and thrash, pulling violently against our silver cord. She was trying to tear herself away from me, desperate to force her soul into Evelyn's unborn child. In a normal universe, a mother's soul would pull back. A mother would fight to keep her child, to try again, to fix the mistakes of the past. But as I felt her profound, sickening revulsion toward me echoing through the spiritual link, something inside me finally broke. 30 years of endless sacrifice, of being a human shield, of loving a daughter who looked at me like I was garbage. It all dissolved into a profound, chilling exhaustion. If you want her, you can have her, I thought. Instead of pulling back, I reached out with my spiritual essence and grasped the shimmering silver cord that bound us. Emily paused, sensing my interference. I could feel her panic, assuming I was going to drag her back to the slums, back to the poverty and the pain. I didn't. With a silent psychic snap, I severed the cord. Emily's soul launched backward, free of my maternal gravity, and slammed directly into Evelyn Pendleton's womb, merging with the billionaire's fetus in a flash of blinding gold. She had won. She had escaped me. But as she left, the soul that was originally meant for Evelyn was displaced. It drifted in the void, a small, gentle, terrified light that had just been evicted from its destiny. I reached out, my heart aching with an emptiness I had never known, and wrapped my spiritual warmth around that rejected soul. I drew it into my own womb. "You're safe now," I whispered to the new spirit. "I will love you." The void violently collapsed, rushing into a pinpoint of agonizing physical sensation, and my eyes snapped open to the harsh fluorescent lights of Boston General Hospital. I was gasping for air, clutching my rounded stomach. A heart monitor beeped frantically next to my ear. David was slumped in a plastic chair in the corner, snoring loudly, reeking of stale beer and cheap cigars. The doctor rushed in, explaining that I had collapsed from exhaustion and malnutrition, but that the baby was miraculously fine. I placed a hand over my stomach. The soul inside me was calm, radiating a soft, gentle warmth. It wasn't Emily anymore. Emily was gone, gestating in a penthouse suite across the city, probably grinning in the dark. What my foolish, greedy daughter didn't know what she couldn't possibly have known from her brief, superficial glimpses of the Pendleton family in our past life was the horrifying truth about Evelyn Pendleton. Emily thought she had just hacked her way into a fairy tale. She didn't know she had just swan-dived into a living, breathing hell. The moment I was discharged from the hospital, the woman who used to be Clara Higgins died. The subservient, terrified wife who walked on eggshells evaporated, replaced by a mother with a terrifying, absolute clarity. David woke up from a bender 3 days later to find the apartment completely empty. I had packed my few belongings, taken the small emergency fund I had meticulously hidden inside the lining of our ratty sofa, and left divorce papers on the kitchen counter alongside a restraining order. I had bullied a pro bono lawyer into expediting. I changed my phone number, boarded a Greyhound bus, and never looked back. I relocated to a rainy, quiet town outside of Seattle. It was terrifying, starting over at 28, pregnant and alone. But compared to the crushing weight of my past life, it felt like flying. I got a job doing bookkeeping for a local bakery, utilizing the sharp math skills I had ignored for years. I worked relentlessly, but this time, the labor was for a future, not just survival. 5 months later, I gave birth to a beautiful, healthy baby girl. I named her Maya. From the moment Maya opened her eyes, I knew we were kindred spirits. There was no resentment in her gaze, no bottomless pit of demands. She was a quiet, observant child who found joy in the simplest things: a stray cat in the alley, the smell of cinnamon rolls from the bakery, the cheap secondhand picture books I read to her every night. Every time I looked at Maya, I thanked the universe for the cosmic swap. I poured every ounce of my rehabilitated soul into giving her a peaceful, loving home. Over the next 8 years, my life transformed. When the bakery owner decided to retire, I took out a small business loan and bought the place. I rebranded it, expanded our wholesale operations, and within 5 years, Clara's Crust was supplying artisan breads and pastries to half the high-end restaurants in the Pacific Northwest. I bought a cozy house with a real garden. I wore clothes that fit. I smiled until my cheeks ached, but I never stopped keeping tabs on the Pendletons. Emily was born a month after Maya. They named her Cassandra Pendleton. To the outside world, Evelyn and Arthur Pendleton were Seattle's royal family. They appeared on the covers of philanthropy magazines, their smiles blinding, their posture perfect. Cassandra was frequently photographed in matching designer coats with her mother, looking like a porcelain doll. To the public, it was a fairy tale. But I knew the reality. Evelyn Pendleton wasn't just a strict mother. She was a clinical, narcissistic psychopath, driven by a horrifying obsession with control and perfection. In my past life, I had scrubbed the floors of the Pendleton enterprise. I had heard the whispered horror stories from their private staff. Evelyn viewed her children not as humans, but as extensions of her own ego show ponies to be broken and trained. Arthur, meanwhile, was a sociopath who enabled his wife's madness, masking his cruelty behind massive charitable donations. My first real glimpse of Emily's new reality happened when the girls were 9. My catering company had been hired for a massive charity gala hosted by the Pendletons at a downtown Seattle hotel. I was in the back, checking the plating of the appetizers, when I had to step out into the hallway to coordinate with the waitstaff. That's when I saw her. Emily, now Cassandra, was standing in an alcove, hidden from the ballroom's glaring lights. She was dressed in an intricate, stifling velvet gown that looked heavy enough to drown her. At 9 years old, she was jarringly thin, her collarbones jutting out painfully against the velvet. But it was her eyes that stopped my heart. In our past life, Emily's eyes were always full of fire, rebellion, and vicious arrogance. The eyes of the child standing in front of me were dead. They were the hollow, haunted eyes of a prisoner of war. Suddenly, Evelyn materialized from the shadows, her stilettos clicking like gunshots on the marble floor. Emily flinched violently, her entire body rigid with sheer terror. "Stand up straight, you disgusting little pig," Evelyn hissed, her voice a venomous whisper completely at odds with the radiant smile she wore for the cameras. She grabbed Emily by the upper arm, her manicured nails digging so deep into the child's flesh that I saw Emily bite her own lip to keep from screaming. "I told you not to eat anything today. You look bloated in that dress. If you embarrass me in front of the governor tonight, I promise you, the basement will be your home for the next month. Do you understand me?" Emily nodded frantically, tears welling in her eyes, though she desperately refused to let them fall. "Yes, Mother. I'm sorry, Mother." Evelyn released her with a look of utter disgust, smoothing her own diamond necklace. "Fix your face. Now." Evelyn turned and swept back into the ballroom. Emily stayed behind, leaning heavily against the wall, hyperventilating quietly. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a tiny, crumpled piece of bread, probably smuggled from the kitchen. She looked at it with starving desperation, but the fear paralyzed her. She threw it into a nearby trash can, sobbing silently. I stood frozen in the doorway of the service kitchen. My mind raced. Emily had kept her memories of our past life when she crossed over. I knew it. She had to know who she was and who she had chosen to become. She had wanted this wealth. She had traded a mother who would have died for her for a mother who was actively destroying her. Slowly, I stepped out of the shadows. I was wearing a sharp, tailored black suit, my hair styled, a clipboard in my hand. I wasn't the ragged, beaten-down woman she remembered. I looked healthy, successful, and powerful. Emily looked up, startled by the movement. Our eyes locked across the marble hallway. For a second, there was confusion. Then, recognition hit her like a physical blow. I saw the exact moment the adult soul of my former daughter, trapped in the starved, abused body of Cassandra Pendleton, realized who I was. Her eyes widened, darting from my face to my expensive clothes, and then to the catering logo on my jacket. She looked at me, and in those hollow eyes I saw a desperate, screaming plea. It was the look of someone drowning, begging for a life raft. She took a half step toward me, her mouth opening, perhaps to call out the name she hadn't spoken in nearly a decade. Mom. I looked at her. I looked at the girl who had cursed me, who had traded me away for gold that turned out to be cursed iron. I felt a twinge of pity, yes. But I also felt the phantom ache of the silver cord she had tried to rip from my chest. I gave her a polite, detached, professional smile. "Enjoy the evening, Miss Pendleton," I said smoothly, my voice devoid of any maternal warmth. I turned on my heel and walked back into the bustling kitchen, leaving my former daughter alone in the cold, opulent hallway of her own personal hell. Years accelerated, blurring into a tapestry of flower-dusted mornings, lucrative business deals, and the comforting, steady warmth of Maya's laughter. By the time the girls turned 16, my bakery had evolved from a single storefront into a regional culinary empire. I wasn't a billionaire like the Pendletons, but I had built a formidable fortune. I drove a sleek Mercedes, lived in a sprawling, light-filled home overlooking Puget Sound, and, most importantly, I had provided Maya with a life free of the grinding desperation I had known in Boston. Maya blossomed into a brilliant, compassionate young woman. She was everything Emily hadn't been: grateful, empathetic, and grounded. When she was accepted into Lakeside School, Seattle's most prestigious and brutally competitive private academy, I wept with pride. It was the very same institution that boasted tech billionaires and political titans among its alumni. Naturally, it was also the school Cassandra Pendleton attended. I knew their paths would cross. It was the inevitable gravity of our tangled souls. Cassandra ruled Lakeside's social hierarchy with an iron, manicured fist. To the student body, she was a terrifyingly perfect ice queen, draped in authentic Chanel and driving a vintage Porsche to zero period. But through the discreet private investigator, I kept on retainer a necessary paranoia left over from my past life. I knew the grotesque reality behind the Pendleton mansion's iron gates. Evelyn's madness had only escalated as Cassandra aged. The billionaire matriarch weighed her daughter every morning on a digital medical scale. If Cassandra fluctuated by more than a single pound, she was locked in her bedroom with nothing but water and laxatives for 48 hours. Evelyn dictated her classes, her friends, her posture, and her future, meticulously molding her into a Stepford-like asset to be married off to a European aristocrat to merge corporate portfolios. Cassandra lived in a state of perpetual, vibrating terror. The collision happened during the winter semester of their junior year. Maya had joined the elite debate team, a squad Cassandra captained only because Evelyn demanded a leadership role for her Stanford University application. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, I arrived at the Lakeside campus to drop off a catered spread of artisan sandwiches and pastries for the debate team's regional tournament preparation. As I carried the trays into the grand, mahogany-paneled library, I saw her. Cassandra was berating a younger student over a formatting error, her voice dripping with the exact venomous cadence Evelyn used. But when she returned and locked eyes with me, the haughty sneer melted off her face, replaced by a ghost-white pallor. She remembered the void. She remembered the hallway at the gala. She knew exactly who I was, and the cosmic mistake she had made. Just then, Maya jogged up to me, wrapping her arms around my neck. "Thanks for bringing the food, Mom. You're a lifesaver." Maya kissed my cheek, her eyes bright and untroubled. I hugged her back, smoothing her hair. "Anything for you, sweetheart. Knock them dead today." I looked over Maya's shoulder. Cassandra was staring at us, her chest heaving, her knuckles white as she gripped a mahogany chair. The sheer, unadulterated agony in her eyes was almost palpable. She was looking at the life she had violently thrown away. She saw my designer coat, my radiant health, and the unconditional, effortless love radiating between me and the soul she had abandoned in the spiritual ether. Cassandra had traded a mother who loved her for a monster who tortured her, all for a pot of gold that I ended up acquiring anyway through hard work. The irony was a jagged blade twisting in her gut. That jealousy mutated into a vicious, unhinged campaign of sabotage. Cassandra couldn't punish Evelyn, so she decided to destroy Maya. Over the next month, Cassandra orchestrated a series of cruelties. Maya's locker was vandalized, her debate notes were shredded, and vicious, anonymous rumors were posted on the school's digital forums. Maya, resilient but confused, weathered the storm, assuming it was just standard high school toxicity. But I knew better. I recognized the spite. It was the same spite that had driven Emily to steal our heating money in South Boston. The climax of her pathetic vengeance arrived when Cassandra planted a stolen, diamond-encrusted Cartier watch belonging to the daughter of a visiting tech CEO inside Maya's gym bag. I received an urgent, frantic call from Headmaster Harrison. By the time I arrived at his expansive office, the stage was set. Maya sat in a leather chair, pale but composed, refusing to cry. Across from her sat Cassandra, looking smug and victorious, flanked by Evelyn Pendleton herself. Evelyn looked at me like I was a smear of dirt on her shoe. "This is what happens when you allow new money and scholarship charity cases into an institution like Lakeside," Evelyn drawled, adjusting her silk Hermes scarf. "They resort to their base, thieving instincts. I demand this girl be expelled immediately, and the police involved." Headmaster Harrison cleared his throat nervously. Miss Higgins, the watch was found in Maya's possession. This is a severe violation of our honor code. I didn't look at the headmaster. I didn't look at Evelyn. I looked dead into Cassandra's eyes. The smugness vanished, replaced by a sudden, creeping dread as she realized I wasn't the broken, weeping victim she remembered from our first life. Before we involve the authorities, I said, my voice smooth as glass, I think you should look at the flash drive I just handed your assistant, headmaster. Harrison blinked, plugging the drive into his laptop. I had known Cassandra was escalating. I had hired a cybersecurity firm to access the school's recently upgraded high-definition security camera network, a network the Pendletons had ironically paid to install. The video filled the screen. It clearly showed Cassandra, looking over her shoulder, slipping into the girls' locker room and shoving the gleaming Cartier watch into Maya's unzipped bag. The silence in the office was deafening. Maya gasped. Headmaster Harrison turned ashen. Evelyn Pendleton didn't defend her daughter. She didn't express shock or seek an explanation. Instead, she slowly stood up, walked over to Cassandra, and struck her across the face with such brutal, terrifying force that the crack echoed off the mahogany walls. Cassandra crashed to the floor, a thin trail of blood welling from her split lip. "You stupid, incompetent little parasite," Evelyn hissed, her voice vibrating with a demonic fury. She wasn't angry that Cassandra stole. She was enraged that Cassandra got caught. "You have humiliated me. Get up. Get out of my sight." Cassandra scrambled to her feet, sobbing uncontrollably, clutching her bleeding face. She looked at me, a desperate, begging plea in her eyes. "Save me," she was silently screaming. "I'm your daughter. Save me." I reached down, gently took Maya's hand, and helped my real daughter out of her chair. "I expect a formal, written apology by tomorrow morning, headmaster," I said coldly. "And if this girl ever comes within 10 feet of Maya again, I will release this footage to the Seattle Times." I walked out, leaving Emily to the merciless jaws of the beast she had chosen. Karmic justice is rarely swift, but when it arrives, it strikes with the precision of a guillotine. 2 years later, the Pendleton empire burned to the ground. It started as a whisper in the financial district and ended with a coordinated pre-dawn raid by the FBI and the IRS. Arthur and Evelyn had been running an impossibly complex Ponzi scheme, embezzling hundreds of millions of dollars from their own charitable foundations and defrauding international investors. The fallout was apocalyptic. Their assets were instantly frozen. The sprawling estates, the yachts, the offshore accounts, all of it vanished overnight. Evelyn and Arthur were denied bail, facing decades in federal prison. Cassandra, fresh out of high school, was left completely destitute. The trust fund she had sacrificed her soul for was seized by the federal government as restitution. The high society friends she had cultivated abandoned her the second her credit cards bounced. It was a freezing Tuesday night in November, a poetic, chilling echo of the night Emily had died in our first life. Seattle was being battered by a torrential downpour. I was alone in my flagship bakery downtown, closing out the register and listening to the rain lash against the plate glass windows. The bell above the door chimed. I looked up. Standing in the doorway, soaked to the bone, shivering violently, and wearing a cheap, oversized coat she had likely found in a donation bin, was Cassandra. She looked exactly as she had in Boston, ragged, desperate, and hollowed out by poverty. She stood there, water pooling around her worn-out sneakers. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The smell of fresh cinnamon and yeast hung in the air, a stark contrast to the heavy, suffocating tension between us. "They took everything," Cassandra whispered, her voice cracking. "My mother, Evelyn, she's gone. I have nowhere to go. I haven't eaten in 2 days." I leaned against the mahogany counter, crossing my arms. "I'm sorry to hear that, Cassandra, but we're closed." She flinched at the name. Then she stepped forward, her eyes wild with a manic, desperate energy. "Stop it. Stop pretending. I know you know. I saw you in the void. I saw you sever the cord." She slammed her hands onto the glass pastry case, leaving wet, frantic prints. You left me! You threw me away and let me go into that psychopath's womb. I didn't throw you away, I replied, my voice dangerously calm, devoid of any sympathy. I let you go. You clawed your way toward that gold. You hissed that you hated me, that you wished anyone else was your mother. I simply granted your dying wish. I was a child, she screamed, tears streaming down her face, mixing with the rainwater. I didn't know. I didn't know she was a monster. I wanted a better life. You were supposed to fight for me. You're my mother. No, I said, stepping closer to the glass, looking down at her. I was your human shield. I was your punching bag. You didn't want a better life, Emily. You wanted luxury without consequence. You looked at the soul I was supposed to have, the soul that was meant for Evelyn, and you pushed her out of the way so you could steal her crown. You walked into hell with your eyes wide open, entirely on your own. Please, she sobbed, sinking to her knees on the tiled floor, her pride entirely broken. Please, Mom. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Take me back. I'll work here. I'll scrub the floors. Just let me come home. The door behind the counter swung open. Maya walked out from the back office, holding a stack of inventory invoices. She stopped, staring in shock at the weeping, pathetic figure on the floor. Mom, Maya asked softly, stepping to my side. Is everything okay? Who is this? Cassandra looked up at Maya. She looked at the healthy, glowing, loved young woman who was living the exact life Cassandra could have had if she had just stayed tethered to my silver cord. The absolute crushing realization of what she had traded away finally broke her. A guttural, agonizing wail tore from Cassandra's throat, a sound of pure, unadulterated despair. I put a protective arm around Maya's shoulders, pulling her close. I looked down at the weeping girl on the floor, feeling absolutely nothing but a profound, empty closure. It's just a stranger looking for a handout, sweetheart, I said to Maya, never breaking eye contact with Cassandra. I reached under the counter, pulled out a $20 bill, and let it flutter to the wet floor in front of her. Buy yourself something warm to eat, Cassandra, I said, my voice as cold and final as a grave, and never come back here again. I turned around, walked into the back room with my real daughter, and locked the door behind us, leaving Emily alone in the dark, shivering in the wreckage of her own greedy choices. If this story of karmic justice and the true cost of greed kept you on the edge of your seat, make sure to hit that like button. Share this video with anyone who needs a reminder that the grass isn't always greener. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another dramatic, real-life tale of revenge and redemption. See you in the next one.